Use headphones for the best experience.
I took the job because my car died in Tonopah and I couldn't afford to fix it. That's the version I tell people. The truth is a little more pathetic. My car had been dying for 6 months, burning oil, transmission slipping, dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree, sent somewhere outside of Reno. I'd been driving it east with no real destination, just away from a life in Carson City that had quietly fallen apart. A lease I couldn't renew, a girlfriend who'd moved out in August, a warehouse job that cut my hours to nothing, and then acted surprised when I stopped showing up. I had about $900 left, and a vague idea that I'd end up in Utah or maybe Colorado, somewhere I could start over, though I couldn't have told you what starting over actually meant. It was just a phrase I kept repeating in my head like it was a plan. The car gave out on Route 6 about 12 miles east of town. Not dramatically. No smoke. No bang. It just lost power, rolled to a stop on the shoulder, and wouldn't turn over again. I sat there for 20 minutes, watching the heat shimmer off the asphalt, before I called the only tow service that came up on my phone. The driver was a big, sun-damaged guy named Cal, who told me the transmission was gone and the repair would cost more than the car was worth. He dropped me and my 2 bags at a motel on the main road through Tonopah, and wished me luck. The motel was called the Sandline. It was a low L-shaped building, maybe 20 rooms, with a gravel lot and a sign out front that buzzed faintly even during the day. The stucco was the color of old bone. A row of dead junipers lined the lot like sentries that had given up. I checked in planning to stay one night while I figured out a bus ticket, and the woman at the front desk, mid-60s, iron gray hair pulled back, reading glasses on a chain around her neck, looked at me for a long time before she asked if I was looking for work. Her name was Dolores. She owned the Sandline. She told me her night clerk had quit 3 weeks ago and she'd been covering the desk herself but couldn't keep doing it. The job was simple. Sit at the front desk from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., check in anyone who showed up, answer the phone, make sure the vending machines and ice machine were stocked. She'd pay me $600 a week cash, and I could have room 1, the one closest to the office, for free. I said yes before she finished the offer. $600 a week was more than I'd been making in Carson City. The free room meant I could save almost everything. And if I'm being honest, I was tired. Tired of driving, tired of the low hum of panic that had been sitting in my chest for months. The idea of stopping, even in a town I'd never planned to visit, felt like relief. Dolores showed me the office that afternoon. It was small and functional. A reception counter, a computer that ran the booking system, a back room with a mini fridge and a cot for slow nights. She walked me through the check-in process, showed me where the master keys hung, explained the ice machine's tendency to jam. She was thorough, but not warm. She had the manner of someone who had learned that efficiency was more useful than friendliness. When she was done, she opened the top drawer of the desk and took out a piece of paper. It was handwritten, on-lined notebook paper, in blue ink. Her handwriting was precise and slightly old-fashioned, with clean loops and even spacing. "These are the rules for the night shift," she said. "I know some of them will sound unusual. Follow them anyway." She set the paper on the desk and left without waiting for me to read it. I heard her car start in the lot a few minutes later. Then it was quiet. The particular quiet of a desert town at the end of the afternoon, when the heat is starting to let go but the evening hasn't arrived yet. I picked up the paper. Night shift rules. Sandline Motel. 1. Between midnight and 4 a.m., a guest may come to the desk and ask for a room. They will always ask for room 6. Do not give them room 6 as occupied. Offer them any other available room. If they insist, apologize and say nothing else. They will leave. Do not watch them walk to the parking lot. 2. At approximately 1:30 a.m., you will hear a phone ringing from somewhere in the building that is not the front desk phone. Do not look for it. Do not try to identify which room it's coming from. It will stop on its own within 3 minutes. 3. The hallway lights on the east wing will go off at some point during the night. This is normal. Do not go into the east wing to reset them. They will come back on by themselves. If a guest from the east wing calls the desk to complain about the lights, Tell them maintenance is aware and it will be resolved shortly. 4. If you see someone standing in the parking lot between 2 and 3 a.m. who is not walking toward the building or toward a car, if they are simply standing, do not open the front door. Do not try to get their attention. Continue your work as if you have not seen them. 5. Room 6 is at the far end of the east wing. You have no reason to go near it. The door will be closed. If it is open, close it without looking inside. Do this quickly. 6. If a guest asks you whether anyone is staying in room 6, the answer is always yes. I read the list twice, folded it, and put it in my back pocket. Then I sat behind the desk and stared at the wall for a while. Here's the thing about isolation. It doesn't make you braver. It makes you honest. When you're alone at a front desk in the Nevada desert at night, and there is no one to perform for, no one to say that's ridiculous. 2. You just sit with whatever you're feeling. And what I was feeling was not fear. Not exactly. It was the particular discomfort of reading something you want to dismiss but can't, because the person who wrote it had clearly been running this place for years, and she wasn't joking. I told myself it was a quirk, something Dolores had developed after too many years in a quiet town, a superstition dressed up as policy. Desert people develop rituals. They assign meaning to patterns. A phone line shorts out at the same time every night, and after a while it becomes a rule instead of a maintenance issue. I figured I'd follow them because she was paying me and it cost me nothing, and I'd probably have a funny story to tell later. Nothing happened. One guest checked in around 11, a truck driver heading to Eli who barely looked at me. The phone didn't ring. The lights stayed on. The parking lot was empty. I spent most of the night reading a paperback I'd found in the back room and eating peanut butter crackers from the vending machine. The second night was the same, and the third. By Thursday, I'd settled into a routine. I'd eat dinner at the diner up the road, come back around 9:30, relieve Dolores at 10, and sit behind the desk until morning. Tonopah at night was remarkably still. Occasionally, a car would pass on the highway, and its headlights would sweep across the lot, briefly animating the shadows between the parked cars. And then it would be quiet again. I started to enjoy it. There's a specific peace in being the only person awake in a place, a feeling of custodianship, like you're the one keeping watch while the world rests. I hadn't felt that calm in months. On my 5th night, at 1:33 a.m., I heard a phone ringing. It was faint, muffled, coming from somewhere down the hallway to my left, which led into the east wing. It didn't sound like a modern phone. It had that older mechanical ring, a real bell being struck by a real hammer inside a real handset. It rang 4 times, paused, rang 4 more times, paused again. I looked at the front desk phone. Silent. The computer showed no incoming calls. The sound continued from the hallway, distant but clear, and something about it pulled at me. Not curiosity exactly. It was more like the way a crying baby pulls at you, an involuntary response, wired deep. My hand was on the counter and I was half out of the chair before I remembered the rule. I sat back down. The ringing went on for another minute and a half, then stopped. The silence afterward had a different texture, thicker. I sat very still and listened to the building settle around me, and told myself it was old wiring, a junction box picking up interference. I almost believed it. The next night, Saturday, was busier. 3 check-ins between 10 and midnight, a couple in a sedan, a solo traveler with New Mexico plates, and a woman in her 40s who looked exhausted and paid in cash without saying a word beyond the basics. I got them all settled and went back to my book. At 12:40, someone walked into the office. I hadn't heard a car pull in. I hadn't seen headlights. He was just there, standing at the counter, when I looked up. He was tall and thin, wearing a dark canvas jacket that looked too heavy for the season. His face was ordinary. I want to be specific about that. He wasn't disfigured or pale or strange looking. He looked like anyone. Brown hair, clean shaven, maybe mid-40s. But there was something about the way he stood that I noticed immediately, though it took me a moment to identify what it was. He wasn't shifting his weight. People shift. They lean on the counter. They adjust their stance. They look around the room. He was standing perfectly centered, perfectly balanced, arms at his sides, and he wasn't moving at all, not even the small involuntary movements that living bodies make constantly. "I'd like a room," he said. His voice was normal, polite even. "Sure," I said. I turned to the computer. "I've got a few available. How about room 9? That's on the west side, nice and quiet." "I'd like room 6, he said. My hand stopped on the keyboard. I could feel the folded piece of paper in my back pocket like it had gained weight. "Room 6 is occupied," I said. "I can put you in 9 or I've got 12 open as well." "I'd prefer room 6, he said. Same tone, same pitch, nothing aggressive about it. "I'm sorry, that room's taken. Can I set you up in another room?" He didn't answer immediately. He stood there, perfectly still, and looked at me. His eyes were brown, and they were aimed at my face, but I had the distinct, irrational feeling that they were focused on something slightly behind me, like he was looking at the wall through my head. Then he said, "All right," and turned and walked out the front door. I did not watch him walk to the parking lot. I looked down at the counter. I studied the grain of the laminate. I listened. I didn't hear footsteps on gravel. I didn't hear a car door. After about 3 minutes, I looked up, and the lot was empty. I sat there for a long time with my hands flat on the counter and my heart going faster than it should have been. Because here's what I couldn't explain. I hadn't been afraid of him while he was standing there. It was only after he left that the fear arrived, like a sound reaching me after a delay. It wasn't fear of the man. It was the fear of how long I'd been in the room with him before I'd noticed the stillness. He'd been standing there, not moving, not breathing visibly, and I'd looked right at him and started a normal conversation. The wrongness had been right in front of me, and my brain had smoothed it over, filed it as ordinary, and moved on. That's what scared me, not him. The fact that I almost didn't notice. I called Dolores the next morning. I didn't tell her about the man. I asked about room 6. "What about it?" she said. "Has anyone ever actually stayed in it?" A long pause. "Room 6 is not in service. Is there something wrong with it?" "Plumbing. Structural. It's not in service. You don't need to go in there. You don't need to think about it." She hung up. That afternoon, before my shift, I walked along the east wing from the outside. The building was simple. A row of identical doors with identical windows, each with heavy curtains drawn. I counted the doors. Room 4, room 5, room 6. The door to room 6 looked the same as all the others. Same paint, same handle, same brass number plate. But the curtain in the window was slightly different. Every other room had beige curtains. Room 6 had a curtain that was almost beige, but not quite. A shade darker, a shade warmer, like it had been replaced at some point with the closest match someone could find. It was the kind of thing you'd never notice unless you were looking. I pressed my ear to the door. Nothing. Not silence. Nothing. A room, even an empty room, has a sound. Air moving through vents, the hum of a mini fridge, the faint ticking of pipes in the walls. Room 6 sounded like holding a seashell to your ear in reverse. Like sound was going in and not coming back out. I stepped away. The next 10 days passed, and I followed the rules, which were accurate. The phone rang in the east wing at roughly the same time every night, give or take 15 minutes. I never looked for it. The hallway lights in the east wing went dark 3 more times. They always came back on within an hour. Once, a guest from room 4 called to complain, and I gave him the line about maintenance, and he grumbled and hung up. And the man in the canvas jacket came back twice more, always after midnight, always asking for room 6, always leaving without protest when I told him it was occupied. He was always still. He never blinked while I was looking at him. I developed a technique. I'd keep my eyes on the computer screen and talk to him without making direct eye contact. And this made it easier, though I couldn't have told you why. On my 16th night, the thing happened that made me start sleeping with the lights on. It was around 2:15 a.m. I was at the desk, half dozing, when I glanced at the security monitor. The sand line had 4 cameras, one on the lot, one on the front entrance, and one on each wing hallway. The East Wing hallway camera showed the corridor stretching away from the office. Doors on both sides, fluorescent lights humming overhead. Everything normal. Then I saw someone standing at the far end of the hallway, in front of room 6. The image was grainy, black and white, but I could tell it was a person. They were facing the door, standing close to it, like they were about to knock or lean their forehead against it. They were wearing something light-colored. They weren't moving. I watched the monitor for 5 minutes. They didn't move. I remembered Rule 5. The door to room 6 should be closed. If it's open, close it quickly without looking inside. But the rule didn't say anything about a person standing in front of it. I didn't know what to do. I picked up the desk phone to call Dolores and then put it down because it was 2 a.m. and because I didn't know what I would say. There's someone standing in the hallway? She'd tell me it was a guest, and maybe it was. I looked at the monitor again. The person had turned around. They were facing the camera now, facing me. The image was too grainy to make out features clearly, but the posture was wrong. Their arms were at their sides but held slightly away from their body, the way you'd hold your arms if you were trying to keep your sleeves from touching your skin. Their head was tilted maybe 5 degrees to the left, and they were standing too far from the door. When they'd been facing the door, they'd appeared to be right against it. Now that they were facing the camera, there was at least 4 feet of space behind them, which meant they hadn't just turned around. They'd moved forward toward the camera without me seeing the transition. I looked away from the monitor. I looked at the counter. I breathed. When I looked back, maybe 30 seconds later, the hallway was empty. I did not go into the East Wing. I did not check room 6. I sat at the desk until 6 a.m. with every light in the office on and the back room door locked. And when Dolores arrived in the morning, I told her I needed to talk. She listened. I told her about the figure on the camera. I told her about the man who kept asking for room 6. I told her about the phone, the lights, all of it. She sat in the chair across from the desk, folded her hands in her lap, and listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Are you following the rules? Then you're fine. Dolores, what is in room 6? She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something behind her composure that wasn't calm. It wasn't fear, either. It was something more like grief, the expression of someone who has lost an argument they've been having for a very long time. Room 6 has been out of service since 2004, she said. My husband, Gerald, was running the motel then. I was living in Reno. We were separated. He called me one night and told me something had checked into room 6, and he couldn't get it to leave. I thought he was drinking. He called me every night for a week saying the same thing. Then he stopped calling. When I drove down, he was gone. His truck was in the lot. His wallet was on the counter. The door to room 6 was open. She paused. Her hands were still folded, but her thumbs were pressing hard against each other. I closed it. I locked it. Whatever is tied to that room stays manageable as long as the door stays shut and no one goes in. The rules keep it that way. The man who comes to the desk, I don't know what he is. I've been running this place for 20 years and I still don't know. But he follows a pattern. He asks, you say no. He leaves. That's how it works. She looked at me for a moment, and her mouth opened slightly, and then it closed. She didn't have an answer for that, or she had one and didn't like the shape of it. Because we're still here, she said, finally, and I could hear in her voice that she knew how thin that was. She stood up and put her reading glasses back on. You're a good clerk. Get some sleep. I stayed. I want to tell you I stayed because I'm brave, or because I felt some obligation to Dolores, or because I wanted answers. But it was simpler and uglier than that. I had no car, no money for a bus ticket yet, and nowhere to go. The Sand Line was paying me, housing me, and the rules, as strange as they were, appeared to function. The man asked for the room and left when I refused. The phone rang and stopped. The lights went out and came back. It was a system. It was stable. And I was tired enough and broke enough to accept a stable system without needing to understand it. So I kept working. And for the next 3 weeks, everything held. I followed the rules. The patterns repeated. I stopped being afraid of the phone ringing at 1:30. I got used to not looking at the parking lot during the dead hours. I developed a rhythm, a way of being alert without being anxious, like a driver on a long straight highway who knows to watch the road without gripping the wheel. Then, on a Wednesday night in late November, 5 weeks into the job, things shifted. The man came in earlier than usual. It was barely past midnight. He'd never arrived before 12:30, and when I looked up from the desk, something was different about the office. Not him. The office. The fluorescent tube above the counter had developed a faint, irregular flicker that I hadn't noticed. Starting. The vending machine in the alcove, which hummed constantly, was silent. The whole room felt like it was holding a breath it had already held too long. He stood at the counter. Same jacket. Same posture. Same stillness. "I'd like a room," he said. "Room 6 is occupied," I said. I didn't wait for him to specify this time. "I can offer you room 9 or room 12. "I'd prefer room 6, he said. "I'm sorry, that room's taken." He looked at me, the same brown eyes aimed at my face, focused on something behind it. "All right," he said, and turned to leave. And as he reached the door, without thinking, without any conscious decision, I said, "Have a good night." He stopped. I don't know why I said it. It was reflex. Hospitality autopilot. The kind of thing you say to every guest who walks out the door. I'd said it to 100 people at that desk. It came out before I could catch it. He turned back to me, and he smiled. I had never seen him smile before. His face did the mechanical thing that faces do when they smile. The corners of his mouth went up. His cheeks shifted. His eyes narrowed slightly. But it was wrong in a way I can only describe as sequential. The movements didn't happen together. First, the left corner of his mouth, then the right, then the cheeks, then the eyes, like a person who had studied photographs of smiling and was reproducing the components in order. "Thank you," he said. "You're very kind." And then he said my name. Not buddy, or sir, or pal. My name. My actual first name, which I had never told him, was not on a name tag, which was not visible anywhere in the office. He walked out. I did not watch him cross the lot. I sat there for a long time. The office was very bright and very quiet. I could hear the ice machine humming in the alcove outside. I could hear my own breathing. I could hear, very faintly, from somewhere deep in the east wing, a sound that might have been a phone ringing, or might have been nothing. I worked at the sand line for 4 more months. I saved enough to buy a used truck from a lot in Tonopah and leave in late March when the weather broke. On my last night, I sat at the desk and wrote a note on the inside cover of the logbook Dolores kept in the back room. I didn't write rules. The rules were already posted. I just wrote, "Follow them, don't ad-lib, don't be polite, don't give it anything it didn't ask for. It's listening closer than you think." Dolores drove me to the truck lot the next morning. She didn't say much. When I got out, she handed me an envelope with my last week's pay and a $20 gas card. "Drive safe," she said. I drove east. I made it to Colorado. I got a job at a hardware store in Grand Junction and rented an apartment near the river. Normal life. Normal routine. But sometimes at night, when I'm almost asleep, I hear a phone ringing somewhere in my building. It rings 4 times, pauses, rings 4 more. It's probably a neighbor's phone. It's probably nothing. It always stops after 3 minutes. And once, about 2 months ago, I was lying in bed at 2 a.m. and I heard a knock at my apartment door. Just one knock. Polite, patient. I got up and looked through the peephole, and the hallway was empty. But the thing is, I didn't check immediately. I lay there for maybe 30 seconds before I got up, and in those 30 seconds, standing in the hallway outside a door I hadn't opened, something said through the wood, in a voice I recognized, "Good night." It knew where I lived. I don't think the arrangement was ever really about room 6. I think room 6 was just where it waited while it learned your name, your voice, the small careless kindnesses you'd offer a stranger without thinking. I think the rules didn't protect you from it. The rules just slowed it down, gave you time to save up, leave town, and become someone else's problem. I've started sleeping with the television on. I've stopped answering my door after dark. And I've stopped saying have a good night to anyone, ever, because I now understand something about that phrase that I didn't before. It's an invitation. And some things, once invited, don't need to be shown the way.